Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. One of my favorite regulars on Everyday Enchantment, Kelly Backert, is here today. If you do not know her, I highly recommend going back and listening to some of our previous conversations because they're also juicy and good. And if you would like a little bit more background information, Kelly is the badass owner of two studios. Core Bar and Yoga is the most recent opening, and Core Boot Camps. But you have been a entrepreneur, a master certified personal trainer. Just to me, Kelly is a voice on the planet that is helping us heal a relationship with food and body. And when we do that, when we talk about this, because we talk about it a lot, both of us have personal life experience with really messy shit. And when you start working on a healing practice, spiritual practice, when you start saying, I'm in for enchantment, I'm in for my intuitive gifts, I want all of this, what I find with people I've worked with people Kelly has worked with, just the planet in general, is there's a lot of messy trauma, addiction, abuse. There is so much stuff that we've either personally experienced or we've had some connection to that really is part of this healing journey, part of this practice of, again, being in relationship with it different, which I think is, what I'm about and what Kelly's about. And again, when you really set your intention to creating a life that is more joyful, if you've skipped over some of this stuff, it's going to hang out with you. So we want to talk about the things that a lot of people aren't talking about so that you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel like I'm not alone out here. I so often for me, Kelly, and I don't know about you, I really believed for the longest time, like nobody understood what I was going through. And then you and I started talking about things because even though our life experiences are different, we both have had very traumatic abuse in our lives. And it's a way to be witnessed and seen, not to relive the trauma, not to relive the abuse, but again, to find peace in this moment, to me at least, to find the place where I can be free and not be still in the toxic patterns. A lot of them, again, created by my family. And interestingly enough, I just want to say this one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to, I can't wait to hear what you want to say, is this isn't about blaming people. This isn't about you or I being in a victim energy, but this is about truth telling. And truth telling rocks a lot of boats. Being the outcast in your family, feeling like you're the one pushing up against all these toxic patterns can be very exhausting and very tiring. It's going to drain all the really amazing things about you because you're going to be so focused trying to just maintain yourself through this. So this episode, in terms of how it relates to enchantment, is really about being in the truth of our lives so that we can own all the parts of ourselves, not from that victim place, but from a place of knowledge, acceptance, and love and compassion too. So those are my things so far. Tell me what you think, and anything else that I missed about what you want to share about who you are and your own journey.
Oh, no, there's nothing else about
Okay.
me.
I know.
I do have a lot to say about what you were talking about, though.
Please do.
So, I think sometimes you nailed it when you said, like, oftentimes when come from a family that has abusive patterns, or we come from relationships that are unhealthy, we have to go through the darkness to get through the light. So in terms of that, it's like people will be like, oh, you're just being the victim. Stop. That's silliness. That's silliness, and that keeps you stuck in the same pattern, and it keeps you super feeling lonely. I think what you and I want to talk about today, and what we're going to address, is you're not alone. Like you said, you're not alone. There's lots of us out here that have had either familial relationships or any type of relationships, whether it's a work relationship, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a romantic relationship where there has been abuse, where there has been boundaries that needed to be set, but we keep going back for whatever reason. Maybe we feel because they're our family, we have to, or maybe we feel like we owe them something, or, you know, there's lots of different reasons. And I think what you and I are going to talk about today is that it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to be it's okay to be not okay with some of the things that have happened to us in the past or that are happening to us now.
Oh, I love the way you said that. And it's okay to walk away. For me, it's funny, my Achilles heel always hurts, literally hurts when I've got some kind of something going on with my family. And it was years before I even realized, like, this is like my most tender, vulnerable space, because there's a part of me that wants to make it work, that wants to make this whole toxic shit show, like, somehow, because I've done my work, that somehow I can operate or be in
Well,
this.
and you're making it always about you. Like, you're making it like, I could do something more if I just do
Yes,
this, if I just do this. Oh, this time I'm gonna try this. This time, I'll try it this way. And you keep like, it's like they always say, this is a stupid little saying, but I do like it. It's like going to the hardware store for bread, right? You keep going back to these same relationships and
absolutely.
these same patterns, thinking you're gonna get, or it's that whatever that
Yeah.
definition of
How come
insanity.
I'm not getting a hammer, I'm not getting a piece of bread?
Yeah, or like doing the
Absolutely.
same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we do. And you know what? What if you do that for a while? And
Mm,
what if that's just totally okay? But then you can come to a place like these places, like this podcast,
mhm.
and you can know that there is a different way. You
Yeah.
can rise above it. You can rise above. You can stop that stuff in its tracks. You
Mhm.
can set up boundaries. You can stop toxic relationships from being in your life. And sometimes it does, I think, in the beginning and throughout it. And you know this, Stace, because you've set up boundaries with people. I've set about it does feel lonely at first. And
It
it
does.
does feel strange because we haven't done it and we haven't been taught to do it. So
Nope.
when you're setting up, I even set up boundaries with silly things like who I'll follow on social media, who
Mm,
I'll allow it, who like I
mhm.
use this a lot, this analogy with food, but like when what are we digesting in our life? Who
Yeah,
are we letting in? Who are we like all of those things. So we need to talk
absolutely.
about that because it's totally okay. And if you're going to get to the place where you're supposed to be who you are on this planet, I believe that you're going to have to set boundaries with people where you're not allowing abuse and toxic things to
Yeah.
get.
Well, it's gonna consume so much of our energy if we don't. And
Mhm.
it's interesting, I wanna go back to a point you made that was on an original point that I said around I think for me, I always looked at it like I was the problem, right? This is the little five-year-old, however old I was. Whatever this situation was that I was living in, I couldn't get out of it, right? So
You're
I'm
so
trying to.
cute, by the way. Oh
Thank
my
you.
God. Has anybody ever
I
seen
do love my little young self, is very cute, and then you look at her eyes and she's got this sadness too.
Aw.
Because there is this, right? How do I survive? And I think again, when we're young, we don't have the capacity, and nobody's saying, "Hey, this isn't you, Stace," right? This is the environment. These are these people. And so what we try, at least what I tried to do was, if I could fix it, if I could do something different, maybe I could somehow change the results. Which again, when you're going through it and you're a child and you're living in a situation, you're just trying to get through. You're
Mhm.
just trying to get along. I have no judgment for whatever I did. It also honed my intuitive empathic skills like nobody's business, because you're reading energy and nuances around people because you're trying to be able to respond to the tiniest little change to avoid some kind of escalation of abuse. And so to me, I think one of the big things, to your point about how do we start to change it so we can bring what we're meant to be doing in the world in even bigger ways, or just being more joyful in our lives, is understanding that it isn't our problem. Like, we are not the problem, and we don't have to keep going back. This is me. I have gone back so many times to try to see if I could fix it and prove whatever I felt like I was supposed to prove. And it was a really messy kind of realization that has kind of developed over time. It's like, number one, just because you can be around the toxic doesn't mean you should or you want to. You said that to me, like game changer for me one time. We were having a conversation. I was like, oh my God, this is so true. Why am I still keep going back? And again, also to your point, it's okay. I think there'll always be a part of me that wants the family to be different, right, than who they are in reality. And so that's okay that I don't have to like try to convince myself differently. But it also doesn't mean that I have to go back in and try to fix or whatever. Like I can absolutely just take care of that part of me without having to act on it with people who do not have my best interest at heart, do not actually want to come into a relationship where there's healing and where there's change. They don't. And, I think also too, when we're like kind of tagged as disruptors on the planet, and there's so many people in my world and in your world we're here to shake shit up. It's
Mhm.
not gonna always be enchantment sometimes is uncomfortable, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we're doing it wrong. You're not here to rinse, lather, repeat the world as it is. You're not here to rinse, lather, and repeat your family and be in the abuse and stay in and be okay and make it okay. No, you're here to change this. And so in order to do that, we are gonna sometimes it reminds me of, Maya Angelou's, like, famous quote that she said, "I belong everywhere, and I belong nowhere." So sometimes we are gonna feel really lonely, and sometimes we're gonna remember I know you always say it's like, do I even belong on this planet?"
Oh my goodness, I say that all the time. Oh my god, I
Right?
say that
You
every
say that. Yeah, yes, you're here.
day, multiple times a day. But, I was thinking about it and I was thinking, sometimes when you're first starting out and you're setting up boundaries, whether it's with your family or whether it's with relationships, there's it's interesting because I think we want to bypass things. Like we want to bypass the feeling. Well, I don't want to feel sad about this anymore. I don't want to feel angry. That's a big one. Not for me, but for most people.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel
Oh,
angry
for me, for
anymore.
sure.
I don't want to like it's almost like people will say to me, "Okay, Kelly, well, I'm setting up these boundaries, but this doesn't feel good."
Yeah.
Maybe, but in the beginning, so it's interesting because like it's difficult. Like
It is.
like it's not like of course you feel all the feelings and of course it's difficult. This is something new.
Mhm.
First of all, like who taught? I mean, we didn't go in school and learn how to set boundaries with people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so when you're setting it, whether it's with relationships, whether it's social media, whether it's with family, when you're setting up those boundaries, especially in the beginning, but even after months or years, there can be that uncomfortableness with it. Like, boy, I really feel sad today that I don't have a mom that I can tell things to. Boy, I
Yeah.
really feel angry today because I know of what my dad put me through, or I'm really frustrated. And it's like, why is that? Like, I think that's totally okay that you have those feelings. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you have those feelings. And oftentimes I think that it's helpful. That's why working with a coach, working with somebody, getting in some sort of group, working with people. Books often help, meditation helps, moving
Mhm.
your body helps. Lots of things help with this process so that you can, because all those feelings do come. I find it interesting because like it's almost like, well, this doesn't feel good. And I'm
Yes.
like, well, no, it's probably not going to feel good, especially in the beginning. But this, like, what are you? I always have to think of it in terms of like, but what's worse? Like, is it okay? I'm feeling sadness about this. I'm feeling a little frustration about this. I'm feeling anger still. Yeah, but okay, but if you go back and you stay in that,
Yep.
it's going to be worse. I mean, you're going to have all those feelings, plus you're going to be being abused.
It reminds me of when I decided I was getting a divorce. This is exactly the scenario. I knew in my heart I wanted a divorce. And you're right. When we know we are ready to make a change, and that was a huge boundary, especially with somebody who had no boundaries and kept even after we were separated, really in my physical all the spaces.
Yeah.
Um You're right. We can't bypass the feeling part of it. And I think that that's sometimes that's the truth of it. Yes, you are going to create some boundaries for you that, yeah, this was for me. I knew it. And yet I probably cried and cried and cried. For the first couple months, there was a lot of crying. And I remember somebody saying to me, another family member at one point, it's okay, like kind of like trying to tamp down the tears. I'm like, no, 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 no. I want to feel this way. I want to feel exactly how I'm feeling. I don't want to numb out. I want to process all of it. It's an ending. It's sad. There's grief. It doesn't feel good because I've been with this person for almost 20 years. If I feel very scared to kind of be on my own and all of it. And I think that that's the point is, and especially again, for a lot of us early on when we were trying to get through these abusive relationships, we probably didn't know how to process the feelings. So now what we're saying is create the boundaries, walk away, do whatever it is that's best for you. And coupled with that and feel feel it all. And yeah, this is the path. I always say nobody loves to talk about the messy middles of transformation. Everybody wants to say, hey, I'm on the other side where again I've created this bound. I mean, again, I got divorced. I feel amazing from that now. And yet, again, there still is, if I'm being 100% honest, every once in a while, part of me that's like, wow, I would have loved to just been that person that got married and like stayed married my whole, like been that story of like, oh, I've been married for 60 years or whatever. It isn't the reality of my life. And there is that part of me that still like longs for that in a way, not the person, just the idea of it. And
Right.
so if I don't judge myself, and I think this is what you're talking about, if we don't judge and we just realize like it's never a problem when a feeling comes up. I had feelings obviously the first year when I was really setting the boundaries, but then the second year and the third year and the fifth year, you're still sometimes these things will feel very tender in a moment or in a
Well,
situation.
you'll have people say, and you're going to know that you're going to feel this. You'll have people say, you know what? I've tried all this before. I've gone back and forth in the relationship with these people. Now, listen, okay, great. What if you've done it 100 times? Well, guess what? This is 101.
Yep.
And now it can be different because
Yes.
I think we judge ourselves around that too. Yeah,
That's
Kelly,
a really
yes.
good point.
See, I've done all this before. I've
Yep.
tried to set the boundaries. I've gone 6 months without speaking to that person. Then somehow I get sucked back in. Okay, great. That's good. That's interesting. So let's stop judging ourselves around that. Let's
Absolutely.
just like let's know that yes, that happened. And yes, we've all done that. Boy, oh boy. I mean, I could talk about a lot of people I've done that with. And
Mhm.
now today it can be different. It
Yeah.
can be different. It can be different if you chose to set a huge boundary with somebody and then you slipped back and you came back again. It's
Yes.
always about coming back again. This is,
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to get into it, but I always use food as I
I
think
love it.
I binge ate or I
Mhm.
had a whole like 3 pizzas. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's like, what are you doing today?
Yeah.
Like we hold ourselves like a ball and chain. We carry around our past. Like, I mean, and it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, yes, you did do that. And yes, it happened in the past, but guess what? Today
Yep.
is today. And
Yep.
you get to choose differently today. And
Mhm.
can we let go of some of those things and stop the judgment that we have for ourselves? And can we do it differently?
Yep.
Today is a new day and we can do it differently. And if we slide back a little bit and maybe we set some boundaries with somebody and then the lines kind of got crossed a little bit, but it wasn't as bad that time. And
Mhm.
then now now I've set a new bound and then I stuck with that boundary. Like, you know what I mean? It's not we act like life is like a straight road and like everything
Yeah.
is just
Linear.
spiritual path.
Versus the pig pen, everything's a mess and jumbled
Right.
circles and sideways. Yeah.
I am going to be so good right now on my diet. Everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to do this perfectly. I'm going to do this perfectly. I'm going to do this and everything's going to go great. Nope. First of all, nope. And
Yeah.
even if everything is going quote unquote great and you are setting those boundaries, that doesn't mean that there isn't the feelings. The
Yeah.
feelings
The
of I
compassion for
can't
being
tell you how many
human.
people try to bypass that. Well, Kelly, why am I feeling, I just want to not feel like, why do you, like, someone will say to me, well, you've set that boundary with that person, but you seem to still have some anger for them. And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, and not like anger, like I'm walking around holding on to it. Like but I've also
It's
had
not
therapy.
necessarily
I
bitterness.
talk to a life coach. I have all these people I surround myself with. I take care of myself. I meditate. I have a spiritual practice that, I mean, you and I could talk about our spiritual practice sometime, right? Like,
Oh yeah, we need an episode on that.
we will talk about things that we do that help us. We surround ourselves with really great people, right? Like you and I surround ourselves. We are diligent about who we surround ourselves with.
Absolutely.
We don't let a lot of toxic things in to our environment at all. So we are able to hold that. So it's all the things. And so I think, so not holding, as you try to, the people that are listening, that are trying to make these transitions and trying to set up boundaries and trying to maybe get out of a toxic relationship, work with somebody, and there's all sorts of things that you could do. One thing is, don't hold judgment on yourself for past things or even things that you did yesterday. Yesterday was yesterday.
Yes.
You have to let it go.
All right. Now that makes me think, well, two things. Years ago, I was at an event and I pulled a rock and they all had little messages and my rock said begin again. And I have that rock near and dear to my office, in my office space, because I always remember it's a very simple thing, but begin again in this moment. And you're right. Nothing is this linear path. We're not meant to be on a linear path. And so everything, again, the feeling part of it then gives us insight and wisdom into our own selves. This is the part we might have bypassed. If we can drop the judgment, even just for a moment, drop the judgment and just be in the compassion. Again, we're rewiring the planet by bringing more compassion to ourselves, and thus it vibrates out. What I immediately think of a tool that I use in life coaching that I want to bring in right now, and I call it the thought amnesia tool. And I don't know if you've ever heard me say this to you or you've heard me talk about it, but basically, to your point, if I bumped my head right now in this moment and I couldn't remember what I did yesterday or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I just could think about what do I want to do right now, right? And I'm not dragging the past, because that's what we all do. We carry the past around and then the brain uses it to inform. But if it was an amnesia moment and you had no access to it, what do you really want to do right now? Because that's, to your point, what I hear you say, Kel, what's so true. It's like, that's what matters. It doesn't matter. Like, I love this analogy lately of like a baby learning to walk. A baby could stumble and fall and stumble and fall for months. And we would love it. We would think it was adorable and excited and cheering them on. But somehow we all have this expectation as adults. You're supposed to get up and run the marathon first try. And if you don't, you're some kind of loser. And it's like, yeah, I'm not down for that kind of thing.
No, me either. Yeah, like there's a saying that says, you take the past and then you project it into the future.
Yes.
And we do that. Yes. And we take the past and then like we hold on to it as if that has to be what's going on right now. Yeah. And it's but you know what? Like you're right, holding space for yourself, holding compassion for yourself. How you and I think choose to go through our life is for all of the changes that you and I have made, whether it's boundaries we've set, our relationship with food and body, whether it's any of these, relationship with ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think you and I have tried a lot of different ways. Okay. Many different diets. Oh God. Anyway, so I'm losing it. My point is that now how we approach all these things is with compassion.
Yes.
And a lot more kindness and a lot more kind of like, I always kind of have to giggle at myself even sometimes. Like I'll even bring humor into it. I'll be like, oh my God, I cannot believe I did that again. Like, really, Kelly? Like that's for real? Or like a thought will come in and I'll think, oh, okay, that's an interesting thought. Like instead of being mad that the thought came in or being angry, like I am able to just be like, wow, that came, that's interesting. And I get really curious about it. And then I'm like, I can sit with myself, even if it's just for a few seconds, and just kind of ask, like, boy, what's that about? That's just
Yeah.
a message. That's just a message that I'm getting. Maybe the message is just like, hey, just slow down a little bit. You're starting to reach for things that aren't important or aren't good for you. Or maybe
Mhm.
the message is just like, hey, you set up that great boundary, but now you're just kind of feeling some anger. So you're kind of wanting to go back to that, but maybe you just can feel through the anger, or maybe talk to a friend about it and get to the other side of it. And then you won't have to reach out to that person anymore. I mean, whatever it is.
That's a really good point because part of our brains are wired to kind of put us back into some state of familiarity and comfort. And so what the brain says is, oh, we need to go back to what we already know because moving forward into uncertainty doesn't feel comfortable yet. And to your point, so again, there's so often it's like it was funny when I left my husband, so many people said to me, I'm surprised you didn't go back. But by the time I had made that decision, I had already gone back and forth in my mind
Yes.
for a
Yes.
long, long time. I had already kind of gone down the path. People just didn't see it.
Yes.
But it makes perfect sense because you're all of a sudden you're thrusting yourself like, again, I no longer want to be abused by people. I don't want to be in an abusive relationship. I don't want to be in these things. So I'm taking myself out. Well, all of a sudden you're in this like space where you're like, well, this doesn't feel much better either. So the brain is always going to be like, go back, go back, go back, go back,
Yes.
go back, right? Go back home, go back where you know. And sometimes home is wonderful, whatever this home state is, and sometimes it's not. And so to your point, it's like if we're willing, and again, this is another practice you and I both use all the time, taking a pause with this is this moment of compassion for
Mhm.
ourselves and go, oh, of course, there's a part of me that wants to go back because it's looking to seek familiar and comfort, even though that wasn't good for me. Part of me is wired right that way for gosh, in my relationship with my first marriage, like 20 years. So you have 20 years of programming for
Mhm.
all your body to say this is what you're supposed to, where you're supposed to be.
But I
Of
think that you and
course.
I also have, and I use this with my food stuff too. And I
Yeah.
keep
Tell me.
coming back to that, but that's just kind of my deal. Is you always have your inner knowing,
Mm,
and if you will allow yourself to get still enough, it will tell you.
yeah.
It's whatever you believe in. It's if it's God, you believe into the universe, or if it's just your inner knowing, or whatever you call that, your intuition.
Mhm.
That's why you and I meditate. That's why we sit in stillness. That's why we get quiet, because in that space you can hear that small voice. And
Yeah.
that small voice will say, "You're doing great." Because
Yes.
people will say, "Well, how do you know the difference between your intuition and your ego?" Your intuition isn't mean.
Nope.
Your intuition is kind. Your intuition is going to tell you you're doing great, keep going. And
Yep.
hey, yeah, you stumbled a little bit, but you know what? You know what's right for you. You know that it's not good to go back to that. And you're going to be great, because the
Yep.
if you can have some faith and you can have a spiritual practice, what I'm telling you is that with this small, like say, so I always say this, like with this, when we talked about this in the last couple podcasts, with the smallest willingness, the
Mhm.
universe wants what's best for you. It wants the greatest gifts, everything that's good in the world. The universe is trying to get you there, right?
Yep.
So all you have to do is have a little bit of willingness. I mean, in the Bible, what do they say? Like a mustard seed or something? I mean, they use different
Yep.
analogies, but in my
Yep.
point, you just need a mustard seed of faith. But my point is that like, I think that if you're willing to do it differently, and there is a little bit of work surrounding it, and not work like let's go run
Yeah.
a marathon work,
No,
but
no,
like
no, 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 yeah. It
sometimes
can be easier to
just
move
sit for
through.
60 seconds.
Yep.
Sometimes somebody, especially like me, who's all around, it's hard, but I'm but the interesting thing is that like that's but that's where it happens. That's where the magic
It
happens.
is.
And it's in that. It's in
It
that.
it is, it's in the messiness, the breakdowns, and I think when I said at the beginning of the podcast that there's a lot of disruptors here on the planet, people like, that came from a knowing when I was probably the darkest night of my some of the darkest nights of the soul kind of moments, and I'm like,
Yes.
"What the F is this about?"
I
And
know.
I got as many of you know, I call it the Wizard of Oz voice, but it's really not. It's Stacey intuition voice or whatever we want to call it. And it says, you aren't here. You aren't here to stay in this space. You are here to create change for yourself and for other people. Trust that. Keep going. And to your point, sometimes it's just like, I don't know what the next step is, or I don't know exactly what to do, but just holding yourself and loving yourself in that space is enough, which again, another beautiful message. You already are enough. There is no getting somewhere, fixing it. Again, I don't believe, and I don't think you believe, that healing is like, oh, we're healed from all the abuse. No, I'm going to carry those things with me as part of me. I can be in relationship with them differently, but healing is a practice. It's messy and imperfect and it's human. And that is that is okay. All of that, the pieces of that, that's what I want listeners to take away from today is like, wherever you find yourself, you are not a project. You don't need to subject yourself to stay in things. And it is difficult. Find yourself support, find yourself someone you trust that can not do the work for you, but help guide you and be there, because you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
All right, my beautiful friend. Well, that wraps another episode of this ongoing conversation that I just feel we're going to have as long as this podcast lives. So thank you always for bringing your wisdom and your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks.
If people want to interact with you beyond this podcast, where do you want them to go? How do they?
Well, they can go to any. Oh gosh, I have so many things, but they could probably just email me, and that would probably be the best bet. So that's just like at corebootcamps@gmail.com, or you can do corebarandyoga@gmail.com. So any of those emails is good. I'm on Facebook at Kelly Backert or Core Boot Camps or Core Bar and Yoga. You can always message me through Facebook and any of those places.
Absolutely. And if you want to continue this conversation, we're always talking about these kinds of things in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. Pop on over if you need a coach support. I would love to talk more about what that looks like for you as well too. So I've had the pleasure of so many amazing coaches and other energy work and modalities to help me. And I know you have as well too. And then maybe that's a podcast for the next time or on the list of topics. So until then, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the flip side. That's it for now, loves. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Get all the juicy details and links we've mentioned in the show notes. If learning more about how you can use your own enchantment to live a oh hell yes life, come get your own coaching session with me by going to staceyandon.com and signing up for my homepage. And as always, come chat with me about this topic and all things enchantment in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. See you on the flip side.